aitah for ending my 6-year relationship after finding out they cheated during the time we lost our son. I've rewritten this post 100 times and no version makes the pain sound any smaller, but I need to get it out somewhere. So here it is. When people talk about grief, they make it sound like a storm, something violent, loud, destructive. But the truth is, it's quieter. It's the sound of someone setting the table for 3 instead of 2. It's the silence after you wash the last tiny onesie that'll never be worn. It's how you stop breathing for a second when you hear another baby cry in the grocery store. That's what my life was like for months after we lost our son, Eli. He was born too early. 31 weeks. We had names picked out, the nursery ready, everything. And then, suddenly, we were leaving the hospital with an empty car seat. My partner, Mason, was my world. We'd been together for 6 years, best friends since college. The kind of couple that everyone said was meant to be. We used to dream about little things. What our kid's first word would be, how we'd decorate our first real home. After Eli, those dreams turned to dust. I barely spoke. Mason tried, but I could see him drifting too, like we were both drowning, but in different directions. At first, I thought grief would bring us closer. Instead, it turned us into ghosts haunting the same house. A few months after the funeral, Mason started working late. He said it helped to keep busy. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. I remember one night, it was raining hard and I sat by the window, watching headlights smear through the glass. I texted him to ask when he'd be home. He replied, "Soon, just finishing up paperwork." But when he got back, his shirt smelled faintly of perfume, not mine. I said nothing. Grief makes you doubt your own senses. You tell yourself you're paranoid, that it's just your mind searching for someone else to blame. So I stayed quiet. A week later, I found her name, a text, a single message that shattered everything. I wish we could have spent the night together again. I don't even remember how I ended up on the floor, the phone clutched in my hand. All I could think was, while I was lighting candles for our son, he was with her. It turned out the affair started during the weeks after we lost Eli. When I couldn't get out of bed, when I stopped eating, when I sat alone in the dark nursery for hours. He found comfort in someone else. He said it wasn't love, that it was a mistake made out of pain, that he didn't know how to handle losing Eli, and she listened when I couldn't talk to you. He cried, begged, said we could rebuild. But how do you rebuild a house that burned down while you were still inside it? Everyone around me had an opinion. His mother said, "Has grieving too. People do desperate things when they're hurt." My sister said, "Once a cheater, always a cheater." My therapist said, "Grief doesn't excuse betrayal. It only explains it." I felt torn between anger and numbness. Some nights I replayed every conversation, every touch, every "I love you," wondering when it had stopped being true. He tried to convince me to go to couples therapy. He brought flowers, wrote letters, left notes on my mirror like we were teenagers again. But I couldn't even look at him without feeling that raw, hollow ache in my chest. Because he didn't just betray me, he betrayed the memory of our son. The one thing I thought would always share. The final straw came 2 months later. We were sitting on the porch, a rare calm evening. Mason said, "You know, maybe Ella's passing happened for a reason. Maybe it's what made me realize how fragile life is." I turned to him slowly, my hands shaking. "You think our son dying helped you realize you wanted someone else?" He froze. I didn't mean it like that, but I'd already stood up. Because in that moment, I knew he wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry for being caught. I packed my things that night. No screaming, no dramatic scene. Just quiet. The same quiet that had followed me since the day I left the hospital without Eli. When I closed the door behind me, I felt something strange. Not relief, not peace. Just a dull, steady heartbeat, mine. Something I hadn't truly felt in months. Mason sent me messages for weeks afterward. Some begging, some angry, some just sad. I read them all and never replied. One of the last things he texted was, "You're really going to throw away 6 years over one mistake?" And I realized, no, I wasn't throwing away 6 years. He had. The moment he decided to grieve in someone else's arms, he buried everything we built together. It's been nearly a year now. I still visit Ella's grave every Sunday. Sometimes I bring flowers, sometimes I just sit and talk to him. Last week, I whispered, "I'm trying to forgive, baby, but I'm not sure I ever will." Because forgiveness, I've learned, isn't always about freeing the other person. Sometimes it's about letting go of the version of yourself that believed love could survive anything. So here I am, Months later, still asking strangers on the internet the question that won't leave me. Was I the asshole for ending a 6-year relationship when he cheated? Even though we were both broken from losing our son, some days I still wonder if walking away makes me cold. But most days I just think, maybe it makes me alive again. Part 2. What comes back when you start to heal is strange. The way time can both numb and sharpen you. A year passed since I left Mason, and sometimes it feels like it's been 10 minutes. Sometimes 10 years. I live in a small apartment now. 1 bedroom, walls the color of fog. It's quiet, but not in that suffocating way it used to be. The quiet here is mine. Every morning I make coffee, open the window, and let the air in. The routine became my medicine. Wake up, breathe, work, exist, repeat. I don't cry much anymore. Not for Mason, not even for Eli. The pain turned into something else. It doesn't claw at me now. It just sits there, like a ghost that learned manners. Then one night, I got an email. The subject line, "I've been thinking about you." From Mason. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I wanted you to know I've been sober for 9 months. Therapy helped. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I finally understand what I did to you. To us, there was more about regret, growth, redemption. The usual things people say when they've rehearsed being sorry long enough to believe it themselves. At the bottom, a single line made my breath hitch. I visited Eli last week. I hope that's okay. I read that sentence over and over. Part of me wanted to scream, "How dare you?" Another part wanted to know what he said to our son. So I didn't reply. Not for days. But grief has a way of seducing curiosity. Whispering, just once more, just to see. A week later, I found myself at the same cemetery, the same path of uneven stones. His car was there. Mason stood near the grave, his hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. He turned when he heard my footsteps, and for a second I hated that my heart still recognized him. "Hey," he said quietly, "hey." The air between us was thick, heavy with words that never got said. He gestured toward the flowers. "I brought lilies. They were your favorite." They were his favorite, I corrected, and he nodded, eyes down. We stood there in silence until he finally spoke. "I don't expect anything from you," he said. "I just wanted to say goodbye the right way this time." Something inside me clenched. "You already said goodbye. You just didn't mean it." He flinched but didn't argue. "You're right. For a long time, that was it. Just two people standing in the wreckage of everything they once thought would last forever." Then he said something that I still think about sometimes. "I keep dreaming of him, has always standing between us, holding both our hands. I wake up before he lets go." I looked at him, really looked. His face was thinner, older, and maybe, for the first time, honest. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought about how betrayal ages differently. For the betrayer, it's guilt that grows softer over time. For the betrayed, it's memory that sharpens. Still, the next week, I found myself answering his second email. Not forgiving, not reconnecting, just answering. "I don't hate you, but I don't trust you either." He replied in minutes. "That's fair. Trust is earned. I'll wait." And he did. For months, he sent small updates. Nothing romantic, just real. A photo of the sunrise, a song that reminded him of Eli, a page from his journal about how he finally told his therapist the whole story. It was unsettling how easy it became to talk to him again. We weren't together, but we were orbiting each other like two planets caught in the same dying star's gravity. Then one evening, he called. "I'm outside," he said. "Can we talk?" Every instinct screamed no, but my mouth said okay. He looked nervous, hands trembling slightly. "I found something of yours," he said, holding out a box. Inside were baby things, a rattle, a tiny whereupon hat, a photo of me holding Eli for the first time. "I couldn't keep these anymore," he whispered. "They belong to you." I felt the tears before I realized I was crying. We sat there for hours, talking, crying, remembering. For a brief, dangerous moment, it felt like forgiveness. And then he reached for my hand. "Do you think," he said carefully, "that we could ever start over?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Part of me wanted to say yes, to pretend that love could conquer everything. But another part of me, the part that learned how to breathe without him, whispered no. I think, I said slowly, we already ended once. And maybe that's the most honest thing we ever did. He looked down, nodded. I figured you'd say that. He stood to leave, but before he walked away, he turned and said, I'll always love you, even if you never believe it again. And then he was gone. I didn't see him after that. Weeks turned into months. One day, I went to Ella's grave again, and there was a new flower arrangement. Wildflowers this time, not lilies. A small card was tucked under a stone. For all the things I can't undo. I never cried that day. I just sat in the sun, tracing my son's name in the marble, and realized something that felt like peace. Forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. It's about letting yourself stop bleeding. Now, a year later, I don't know where Mason is. Maybe he's sober, maybe he's not. Maybe he really did change. But the truth is, it doesn't matter anymore, because healing doesn't always look like a happy ending. Sometimes it looks like walking past the ghost of who you used to be and not turning back. Part 3. The letter I wasn't supposed to find. It had been almost 2 years since I last saw Mason. Sometimes I still checked my inbox, not because I expected him to write, but because grief trains you to wait for ghosts. The silence had become its own rhythm. Until one afternoon, the rhythm broke. My phone rang. The caller ID made my stomach drop. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, that same stubborn instinct that once believed we could survive anything, whispered, pick up. Hello. A pause. Then a woman's voice. Is this Claire? Yes. My name's Anna. I work at St. Luke's Hospital. I'm sorry to tell you this, but the world tilted. The next words blurred into a quiet roar. Mason. Accident. Didn't make it. I remember sitting down right there on the kitchen floor, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to her say things like condolences and contact information, words that didn't fit inside the air I was breathing. When the call ended, the silence hit harder than any scream could. He was gone. I didn't go to the funeral. I told myself it wasn't my place anymore, that closure wasn't something he'd earned from me. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice, the way he used to say, hey, sunshine in the mornings. The sound of his laugh when Eli kicked for the first time. So I drove. The cemetery was empty, moonlight slicing through fog. His name wasn't even carved yet, just a temporary plaque. The kind they use before the stone arrives. Someone had left a small box beside it, a wooden one, sealed with twine. My name was written across the top in his handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I took it home, set it on the table, and stared at it for hours. Because the truth is, I didn't want answers. Answers mean reopening wounds you've already taught yourself to live with. But at dawn, I gave in. Inside the box were a few things. A photo of us holding Ella's ultrasound. A silver locket I thought I'd lost years ago. And a folded letter, edges worn, smudged with fingerprints. The first line stopped my heart. If you're reading this, I guess I finally ran out of time. I read it slowly, my hands trembling. I never knew how to love you the right way after Eli. I thought love was fixing things, but you didn't need fixing. You needed someone to sit in the dark with you. And I left you there. I thought if I found someone else to distract me from the pain, it would fade. But all I did was build a bigger hole inside myself. You were right. I wasn't sorry for being caught, not at first. I was ashamed that I'd become the kind of man who could hold your hand at a funeral and still lie to you the same night. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know that everything after you left it was empty. Every attempt to move on felt like pretending to breathe underwater. There's one more thing I have to tell you. A few weeks after you left, I went back to the hospital to talk to one of the nurses. She told me something I never had the courage to tell you, because I didn't want to make your pain worse. Eli lived for 7 minutes. You were unconscious. I held him. He opened his eyes once. I told him that you loved him. I've replayed that moment every day since. So if you ever doubt that you were a good mother, don't. He heard you. He knew. By the time I reached the last line, I could barely see the words through the blur of tears. I love you, Claire. Always have. Always will. Tell him I tried to be better. Mason. I sat there until the sun came up, holding that letter like something alive. The anger, the betrayal, the years of silence, they all fell away. leaving only exhaustion. For the first time since losing Eli, I didn't feel broken. I felt human, because grief had fooled me into thinking forgiveness was a gift I owed to others. But maybe it was something I owed to myself. Weeks passed. One morning, I went to the cemetery again, to Ella's grave first, then to Mason's. I placed the letter between them, weighted it with a smooth stone, and I whispered, "You were both loved. That's enough." Months later, I moved again. A little house by the coast. Sometimes, when the wind picks up and the ocean sounds like breathing, I imagine Eli and Mason together somewhere beyond it, to souls that never really left me, just changed shape. I keep the photo from the box on my bedside table now, not because it hurts to look at, but because it doesn't anymore. Because the pain turned into something softer. Not a wound, but a scar that glows in the right light. People still ask me sometimes, would you have stayed if he hadn't cheated? And I always say the same thing, maybe. But then I never would have learned that sometimes love isn't what survives. You do. So, aitah for walking away from a man who betrayed me when we were both broken. Maybe once I thought I was. But now I know. Leaving wasn't punishment. It was the beginning of mercy. For him, for me, for all of us.